Thank you. I will present today a few studies about the usage of UAV swarms for precision agriculture. First of all, the main point is why using swarms for this task. Well, precision agriculture is particularly suited for swarms because it deals with extensive fields where conditions may be extremely heterogeneous from one end to the other. And therefore, you may want to parallelize operations so that multiple robots can take care of different parts of the field. But also, you would want that your robots collaborate in order to improve the accuracy or the performance in the action they are performing. Also, swarms, as you know, are redundant systems. So we can aim for a highly robust system so that even if a few units stop working, the system can continue the full mission. And also is a decentralized system with a high scalability so that we can decide the size of our system depending on the size of the problem. So for a small farm, we can use a few robots. For a large farm or grasslands, for instance, we can use a larger number of robots and aim at a very efficient system. Actually, I'm presenting on the right here a concept from Xavier from Fent, which is a swarm of ground robots for seeding, for precision seeding. And they find that the concept of swarm robotics here, also connected in the cloud, can be very useful to improve the efficiency and the sustainability of several actions to be performed into the field. But I'm not talking about ground robots here. What I will be showing you is about UAVs. And the concept is that these UAVs could collaborate with each other in order to identify relevant areas in the field where some action must be performed. In particular, I've been looking into the mapping of weeds. In order for a swarm of UAV to be efficient, well, the hardware must be tailored in order to enable communication in between the different robots. We need a high-level control in order for the robots to coordinate and decide on the fly what to do. And of course, this must be informed by onboard vision. The latter should be efficient enough to be deployed on limited computational resources and should enable the estimation, for instance, of the weed density in the case of the problem I'm studying. Put together, the hardware and the vision should enable the high-level swarm control. And what I will present today are techniques for the coverage over a field by multiple UAVs and the collaborative creation of a map of the weeds in the field. So, first of all, first and foremost, we need to have a suitable approach for crop weed detection that can be deployed on board. I'm using here the standard benchmark of detecting volunteer potatoes into sugar beet fields, which has been studied very much in order to understand how can we deploy vision systems that can be useful for swarms. Our first study was tailored to understand what can be the quality of the classification, the accuracy, when we start reducing the size of a deep neural network in a way that can be deployed on the limited computational resources of our drones. So we used in the studies the faster RCNN framework, but with a very shallow backbone. And we obtained the FCN5, what we call the FCN5 network. And we trained it on a real data set with both sugar beets and volunteer potatoes. And the results were already pretty good, also already with a small network like the one that we used. Still, the results were not perfect. If we consider what is the error rate given the true number of weeds that have been detected, we can see that the higher the number of weeds, the larger is the bell of possible detections, meaning that this network can actually lead to several errors, both false positives and also false negatives. Sorry, but there is a thunderstorm arriving. Okay. So we need to find a way to improve this detection accuracy, and we can do that by exploiting the features that swarms can observe the same portion of the field multiple times. Indeed, if you have multiple UAVs that are observing your field, you can imagine that the same area can be observed by different UAVs at different time. So they will perform somewhat independent classifications, which will be influenced by the particular conditions that they will encounter when they observe the same area. And now the idea is that the output of one classification can be used as an input to the following classification. To do that, we could use some neural network with memory, like long short-term memory. But this is not suitable if we are thinking that the same area must be visited by different drones, by different UAVs in a swarm. So what we thought of doing was to encode somehow the observations that were previously done by the same drone or by other drone into a kind of a probability map that could be fed to the network. And by multiple observation, then this probability map could be refined in order to obtain better results. So the concept is displayed here in this picture. We have been running this process on a simulated field with the photorealistic rendering. And you can see that here on the first observation, the probability map is empty because we have no previous information. And we obtain a certain classification of the crops and of the widths. Then, on the basis of the bounding boxes that are discovered, we compute a probability map, which tells us where widths are most likely found. So a second observation can be joined with this probability map to refine the identification of widths. And this can be done multiple times across multiple observations. And you have to consider that across multiple observations, the conditions may vary. The luminosity may vary, the position may vary a bit, and so on. So you have somewhat an improvement of the observation and of the classification over time. And by testing this approach, we see that the more observation we accumulate, the higher becomes the accuracy. And actually, the F1 metrics becomes higher, becomes comparable to the performance that is obtained by an FCN9, while we are using still an FCN5 as the base architecture for this network. So this suggests that by exploiting multiple observation, by accumulating information over time, we can obtain an improvement in the accuracy, despite the underlying architecture is still small and prone to errors. Of course, if we consider the a field, an agricultural field, well, this is pretty static. It does not change very much from 1 hour to the other. So if our swarm is observing the same field multiple times, we don't expect much change. And this is actually something that tells us, well, if we observe it repeatedly, we are not gonna get much more information. So we thought that we could improve by making multiple observation if we consider that the same area can be observed from different points of view. So imagine now our field that is divided into cells, and each time a drone is flying over one area, it can observe one or more cells. So if this is our target cell that we want to observe, well, our drone can probably observe it from different points of view because it can position itself in different parts of the field. Every time we observe the same portion of the field, now we obtain a slightly different perspective. And this can lead to discover features that could not be accessible from one single perspective. And this can be done also by multiple drones that can observe in parallel the same area. We believe that this makes sense above all when occlusions are possible. So we are now, for instance, collecting a large data set for tomato cultivations in the field. And here, if we want to count the number of tomatoes that are there, well, the perspective under which you observe the field will be very important because of occlusions from the plant, from the leaves, or from the tomatoes themselves. However, given that we are not there yet with building this data set, we started our investigation with an artificial, with a mock-up system, where instead of the plants, we use boxes and targets of the boxes that are placed on one of the sides. We have built then our large field with a lot of boxes, and we try to observe how we can map the presence of targets on the boxes using our drones by exploiting this idea of observing from multiple points of view. So does it work, the vision of boxes? Well, when you are on top of the boxes, you don't see much, actually. So you have to orient yourself on a perspective that can somehow highlight the presence of the target. And note that the targets are not always on every box that we put in the field. So there are some boxes that are, say, some distractors, while only a few boxes have the targets, and we have to identify the right number of targets that are in every portion of the field. So we train the network to do this, and these are the overall results. So this is, again, a confusion matrix. Note that the network was trained to return the probability mass function that a certain number of boxes had a target, that a certain number of targets were present in every portion of the field. And you can see that actually the higher probability is found on the diagonal, as you can imagine is the most important aspect. Then, on the basis of this output, we have built a model of how the multiple observation can reduce our uncertainty. So basically, we consider the probability mass function. So we have a distribution of probabilities for every number of possible widths or targets that we can find. And then basically every time we obtain a new observation, we update this probability, exploiting the bias theorem in order to compute the new probability given the new observation. And with that, of course, what we can do is to compute the residual entropy using the Shannon entropy with the standard formula. So if we do that, given that we have 8 possible values for the number of boxes that we are considering here, at the beginning, you have a maximum entropy that is 3, because every possible value, when you have 0 observation, every possible value is possible. But as soon as you start accumulating observation, then you can see that the entropy drops and rapidly goes to 0, especially on the extremes, which are the conditions in which it's much easier to understand how many targets are there. While for mid values, the entropy goes down a little bit slowly, but still gives sufficient information to understand whether the number of targets is in one or the other category. So basically, given this model, we can understand how much uncertainty is remaining and how many other observations are required in order to improve our mapping of the field. So now, how can we use this information to inform an intelligent active monitoring for a swarm of UAVs? Remember that our goal is to cover completely a field by taking pictures everywhere and analyzing these pictures on board. We want that a map of the field is generated in collaboration between different UAVs. So these UAVs have to exchange some information about what they found in the field. And given that fields are in general heterogeneous, we want to increase the monitoring effort only in relevant areas. So only in areas where weeds or boxes, in the case of boxes, are found. We want to obtain a system that is robust, efficient, and scalable. So we want a system that does not depend on the exact size of the team, where UAV can plan their movements according to the actual position of the others in a reactive and easy way. So to do this, we resorted to random walks. However, to inform the random movement of the drones, what we need is to compute what is the information gain that corresponds to additional observation in every cell of the field. So we performed the study by using the initial, our first word, this our first model of uncertainty, and on top of our entropy reduction, we were able, by using this model, to compute the information gain, which is the residual uncertainty that is expected from further observations of the same area of the field. Then we have developed a random walker that is based on the notion of information gain. So given a certain cell, we compute what is the probability that this cell should be observed as basically on the basis of the information gain of all the cells that could be visited in a certain neighborhood. And then we also consider the fact that multiple drones are observing in parallel, and multiple drones can go and visit the same cell. So we have to discount actually what is the influence of what is the probability that other drones would visit the same cell that we are targeting. And in this way, we compute a utility of visiting every cell in the neighborhood of a drone. And on the basis of this utility, we basically select the cell with the highest utility. So we have a greedy approach, and the drone can then move and walk in this new cell that is computed as I just explained. We have then compared this approach with a random walk that is based on potential fields. What does it mean? This means that when a drone is exploring, it computes some vectors of attraction towards areas where previous information say that it is weeds have been found. And then the drone is also repelled by the presence of other drones. So these attraction or repulsion forces are summed up to compute a resultant direction, which serves to give a higher probability to those cells that are in the direction of desired motion. So on the basis of this, then a random walk is performed. We have done a lot of experiments to understand how the error in mapping decreases over time when the field is observed by multiple drones in parallel. Here, what you see is the reduction of the mean square error for the baseline strategy that consists in visiting every cell of the field with a kind of sweeping strategy. The values on the x-axis represent the number of times that the field is explored completely. So m equal to 2 is the time that our system takes to cover the whole field twice. Okay, so you can see that the more you observe, the more you integrate information, the more the mean square error in the number of widths that are present in every cell decreases. The heuristics that is based on potential fields actually starts very bad, but then improves over the baseline when you perform 6 or more complete coverage of the field. So you can have an improvement over the baseline, but late in time. And we know that from many experiments, we know that this approach is very sensitive to parameter selection. The approach that is based on information gain instead leads to an uncertainty reduction that further improves over the potential field baseline. And we can see that with only 3 times the time needed to sweep the whole field, you obtain already a performance that is equivalent to the one of the baseline, and then this performance can go down very, very fast. And also this system is totally independent from the parameters of the system. It works the same way if we have 10, 20, 30, or even 50 drones exploring in parallel. Of course, you have to imagine that when you have a lot of drones, like 30 or 40, the time is really shorter, the effective time. We are comparing here with the equivalent time that would be needed by a group of 40 drones to sweep the whole field. Okay. So in conclusion, we can say that we can have several advantages by using a UAV swarm, by having parallel operation and collaboration that leads to an improved accuracy in the detection of the features of interest, in our case, widths, and we can obtain also strategies that are parameter free, that are very robust and scalable, so they can work with the different group sizes. Even these systems can work by varying in real time the size of the group. So if some robots stop working, or if you add more drones, then the system will continue to work the same way. The information gain exploration can focus on relevant areas of the field. So this is the reduction of uncertainty goes beyond the one of a sweeping strategy, because drones are spending more time only where widths were present, and this leads to actually an improved reduction of the error. So in the whole, by self-organization and by exploiting multiple observations, we hope that we can obtain systems that can map faster and that can also be more precise, more accurate than the systems that work with only passive sensing strategies. Thanks a lot for your attention, and I'll be ready to answer for any questions in case there is.